What's up, you guys? Thank you so much for watching and welcome back to my channel. I have to say before I start that I'm so lucky, and I know I'm so lucky that it didn't go any further than it did, because I really didn't know how to deal with the situation at the time, and I probably did a lot of things wrong. And you'll hear the things that I did wrong as I go along in the story, but never thought it would happen to me. My problem is I always see the good in everybody. I always try to think like positive, like, oh, this person's probably a good person, they just might be a little off. But in today's world, you can't really think that way about everybody. And after this situation happened, then I realized, you know, I gotta really put my guard up for certain people and realize that some situations could turn into a serious situation if I'm not careful and if I'm too nice. And I struggle with that a lot. I'm like too nice to some people, and some people are creeps and they take it the complete wrong way. So this happened when I was 20 years old. I was living in Cleveland at the time with my best friend Hannah, which you've seen her on my channel before. I was in school. I was going to Innovative Cosmetology school at the time. And as I was in school, I worked at this little boutique. So I left my work around like 5 p.m. and there's like a stoplight like as soon as you pull out of the plaza. So I was at the stoplight, and you know how you can like feel when somebody at the stoplight is like staring at you, like you just like sense it. So I just like kind of turned my head to see if like they were actually looking at me. And I look over and this guy has his window down, and he literally goes like this. He's like trying to be all sexual and seductive, and I was like, okay, that's not what I was expecting to see when I looked over, but okay. I just kind of like let it go. I'm like, okay, he's just like a weirdo, whatever. And I honestly didn't think anything of it. So the light turns green, and right as soon as I went under the traffic light, I needed to turn left into a Chase Bank because I wanted to go to the ATM. And the ATM is not one of those that you pull up to and get it like while you're in your car. You actually have to get out of your car and go to the ATM. I park my car right in front of the ATM, and I walk up to the ATM, I finish my transaction, and as I'm walking back to my car, this guy is pulling into the Chase Bank. And so then I was like, okay, this is really weird, because he was right beside me. So if he would have been going into the Chase Bank too, he would have literally like went in right as I did. So that means that he like he was like driving past the Chase Bank and then decided to turn his car back around to see if I was still there and to like follow me. So then I kind of started getting a little weirded out. I'm like, okay, this is actually kind of weird, because I was at the ATM because I was waiting for somebody else to make a transaction, and I was waiting there for probably like 7 minutes. So he like literally waited 7 minutes and then came into the Chase Bank. It was so weird. After Chase, I went to, it's called Drug Mart, but it's like a CVS. So my apartment, it's Chase Bank, and then my apartment, and then the CVS, like the Drug Mart. And so I was like, okay, I can't go home because he's gonna know where I live, and I have to go get makeup from Drug Mart anyway, so I'm just gonna go to Drug Mart because it's a public place and he won't be able to follow me into there. And I'll be around people, so like if anything happens, like I can cry for help. I go to the Drug Mart and I pull in and I park my car. And I just kind of like look around to make sure that he's not like watching me walk into the Drug Mart, because I didn't see his car. Like he was following me from the Chase Bank to the Drug Mart. Like I could tell he was following, but he was trying to keep like a safe distance so that I wouldn't know. But I'm like really smart when it comes to this stuff, thank God. So after I pull into Drug Mart, I don't see his car pull into the Drug Mart too. So I was like, okay, like maybe I lost him. So when I get out of my car, I look around and he is parked across the street in another like parking lot. It was like an auto zone or whatever. And literally like sitting in his car staring at me. Like, how, are you that dumb? Are you that dumb? And so then I go into the drug mart and I'm like, there's no way he's gonna follow me in here because that would be dumb on his part. Like, we're around a bunch of people. I'm in the makeup aisle. There's like a couple makeup aisles. So I'm in the first makeup aisle. I don't find what I want. So I go to the second makeup aisle, and as I'm getting my foundation, I see him walking into my aisle. You don't need anything in there. You're a straight man. You don't wear any makeup. There's literally nothing in this aisle other than makeup, and like everywhere around it is all beauty related. So unless like he has a wife, which he doesn't because I found that out, but I mean, unless you have a wife or a girlfriend that you need to buy makeup for, or your mom, like there's no reason for you to be in the beauty aisle or the beauty section. But then I kind of started like freaking out. I'm like, okay, this is kind of serious now because now he's like in my aisle. So then I go to the cash register and I realize that I forgot my debit card. So I'm like, hold this here. I'm gonna run out and grab my debit card and then I'll come back in and pay you. He's like, okay, no problem. So I go out, grab my debit card, and as I'm coming back into the store to pay for my items, this guy is walking at a drug mart with a bag in his hand, like he actually bought something at the store to make it look like he wasn't following me. So then I go to the cash register and I ask the cashier, I'm like, did you see this guy? Like that guy with like a buzzed head? And he's like, yeah, why? And I'm like, because he's been following me for like the past 25 minutes. Like he literally followed me to Chase Bank, followed me all the way to Drug Mart and parked across the street when there was plenty of parking in the Drug Mart parking lot. And then like followed me into the aisle, and he's like freaking out. This guy was like, I've literally seen him do that to another girl before too. And I'm like, what? So I don't know if this guy was like just trying to be dramatic or if he was like really high or something. I don't know, but I still don't know like what that whole situation is. I told the detective when it came to that time, but I'm still really not sure what was going on with that. Then I leave Drug Mart and I get into my car. I'm like looking around, making sure he's not around, and I didn't see his car anywhere. So I'm like, okay, he actually might have left. So I go back home, and that's when I call the police and I'm like, hey, this guy, I tell him the whole story. I'm like, this guy's been following me for like 25, 30 minutes. Like, I don't know what to do. And they're like, well, why don't you come in and you can do a written statement. And I'm like, I am not leaving my house. I had such a long day of work. Like, this has all been like pretty traumatizing for me at 20 years old with my parents not around. Like, it was just, I didn't want to leave. Like, I wanted to stay in my bedroom and just shut the door and not come out. And so they were like, no problem. Like, they did not take it very seriously at all. So then nothing happens. I had to go home okay, so this happened on a Sunday, and then I had to go home the following weekend for my friend's wedding. It was right before the wedding. It was that following Saturday, and I get a call from a detective. And they're like, hey, I don't want to freak you out, but we wanted to let you know that the man that was following you that you described actually ended up following another girl right after he left Drug Mart. And I was like, what? So then I started freaking out because I'm like, oh my gosh, like how much does this guy know about me? Like, has he been following me for a while? And so then detective was like, you know what, I just need to tell you the whole story because like this is gonna be a long, we're gonna have to do a lot with this whole situation. And so I was like, okay. And at the time I was 20 years old, I'm like, I don't know anything about this stuff. Like, how am I put into a situation like this? So apparently this detective also told me, he's like, I don't wanna freak you out, but this guy has been charged with 2 rapes, 1 attempted rape, and 1 indecent exposure where he was actually naked by a kid's playground. Creepy, gross. And I think he also like pulled his thing out in public and like was peeing in front of a bunch of people, not even drunk. So the detective told me that this guy, if you guys aren't from like Ohio, I don't know if they have it anywhere else, but Ohio has a store called Giant Eagle. It's like a grocery store. And so after this guy left me at Drug Mart, he ended up going to the grocery store, and this girl was with her dad at the grocery store, and her dad went inside and she was like sitting in the car waiting for him. And this guy, he literally was circling her car. He pulled up like in front of her and was just like staring at her, and she was like, well, that's weird. So then he left, and he ended up like pulling in a parking spot behind her, and then like ended up like just repeating himself, like circling her car and just like watching her. And so then she's like, okay, this is weird. And she wrote down his license plate and actually called the police and was like, this guy is like stalking me. He's like not leaving me alone. He won't stop looking at me. Like something's off about this man. And so the way she described his car, I never gave a license plate because I never got that close to his car. And at the time I was like freaking out, so I didn't even think to like try to get it. But I explained like the color of the car and what he looked like, and she explained the color of the car, the kind of car, and what he looked like to a T, the same like what I had described to them. So then that's when they reached out to me and they're like, we need you to come in for a picture lineup to make sure that this is the same guy. I had to go for a picture lineup, which was really crazy. Like I've always seen it in like all my shows that I watch, but to actually see these pictures being pulled out of folders, it was actually like I had a lot of anxiety about it because you don't know what all of these people did. I think he pulled out like 7 different pictures of seven different men, and you don't know what any of these men did. Like they could have killed people. Like you're just like looking into the eyes of like a criminal, like a really, really dangerous man. I ended up picking the same guy as that girl. I mean, I had no problem because this guy was he had a very distinct face. Like you could definitely pick him out. If I saw him again, I'd know exactly who it was. The detective, like after the picture lineup, he was like, you know, the way that this guy works is he follows and this is probably like a lot of rapists, but they like track what you're doing on certain days to see if like it repeats itself the next week, so that they know exactly where you're gonna be when they wanna make their move. So for one of the girls, it was an attempted rape. He knew exactly when she came home from work and when her roommate wasn't home somehow. And he crawled through her window and tried to rape her, but she actually got away and called the cops right away. It's really nothing to mess with. If you feel like someone is following you, like definitely call the cops right away. I made the mistake of waiting until I got home, which I should never have went home. Thank God he didn't follow me there, but who knows if he knew where I lived. I mean, I don't know how long he had been following me, but it was definitely scary. So then I went to court, and the way that the court worked was they actually let us do like a video type deal, so that I didn't have to see his face. So like basically the detective and like everybody was in the room and I was actually outside of the room, and they were speaking to this man via video. Glad it worked out like that because I honestly didn't want him to like get a better look of my face, because this guy has been in jail so many times and still continues to follow people after he gets out. So like I knew like if he would be put in jail, that after he would get out, he would still like try to come after me. So I ended up getting him put in jail for 6 months. But during that time, they heard another story of this guy. His job was to deliver refrigerators to different states all over the US. I forget where he was. I want to say it was Missouri. Apparently something happened in Missouri where it was like a similar situation. And so he ended up having to spend a full year in jail between like my situation and the Missouri situation. So in the meantime, the cops were telling me, you know, you need to either delete all of your social media, which I was like, that's not an option because that's a lot of how I get business. And then he was like, okay, well then you need to at least take your last name off of everything. And so for those of you that follow me on everything on social media, that is why my name is Alyssa Lynn and not Alyssa Hartrick, because it's just not as easy for him to track me that way. But they let me know like when he got out of jail, and luckily at the time I was moving back home for a little bit, so it just worked out so well. But I mean, I was still like watching my back for like a couple years after that, because I'm like, I don't know what this guy knows about me. We don't even know how long he's been following me. Maybe that was the first time. Hopefully it was. I guess the lesson learned is to not trust everybody and to not take things lightly sometimes when you feel like something's actually wrong, and definitely call the cops the minute you think someone's following you, because it could end up being too late. And I made the mistake of going home. I highly suggest not to ever do that, because you do not want, maybe he already knew where I lived, but if he didn't, I did not want him knowing where I lived, because that could be really dangerous. And then it could also put Hannah in harm's way too, because she lived with me. So yeah, not fun. I hope you guys enjoyed this story time. And if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and also subscribe if you're not already. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye guys.